Welcoming you onto the field here at Research Stadium following Oregon State's 33-25 loss to UNLV. Publisher Brenden Slaughter here for BeaversEdge.com. Joined by Beavers Edge writer Ryan Harlan. We're coming to you guys here on the field post-game. What turned out to be a pretty weird matchup and a flair for the dramatic at the end. Unfortunately, Oregon State falls to the second straight week, Ryan. Obviously, back-to-back losses to teams from the state of Nevada. Obviously, very different story from the game last week in Reno. We'll obviously be breaking it down at BeaversEdge.com. But just what are kind of your initial first takeaways, from this game? And, it was better in some regard for Oregon State, Ryan, but just not enough.
No, not enough. I mean, the run defense was drastically improved from last week to this week. I mean, albeit given the amount of yards that they gave up on the ground and yards per carry, at least in the first quarter, where they gave up 83 at the end of the first quarter, which was an improvement, but still not great that you almost nearly gave up 100 yards rushing on the ground in the first quarter. The offense looked a little better at times, a little more cohesive together, kind of carrying over what we saw, at least in the first half, what we saw from Nevada. As for the second half, well, that's a little different story there with, what was it, only 10 rushing yards in total in the third quarter. That's just simply, for a team like Oregon State, that's just simply unacceptable. Yeah. I mean, there's some things that you take away from that you kind of look at and you're like, oh, at least it was better in some regards, but you don't play for moral victories in football. Yeah. You play to win the game, and Beavers weren't able to do enough, where I thought, at least right at the very end there, you should not have been in that situation to begin with. To have to basically win this game in overtime like you did against Colorado State, where it just seemed to be, it came in a moment where it was a little too late. And sure, that pass interference call was a little egregious, but games aren't decided on that one call, and everything that led up to it played a factor, and especially how that third quarter panned out.
Absolutely, and you go back to this game itself, Oregon State, things were flying high. Giovanni McCoy ran for a 71-yard touchdown. Oregon State went up 17-6, and it was like, whoa, okay, what's going on here kind of a thing. And, then UNLV just kind of started to chip away at it. I mean, you talk the following drive after that when the Beavers were up 17-6, and again, as Ryan mentioned, we mentioned, third straight week of Oregon State blowing a double-digit lead. Only second straight week where it's come back to bite them, but nevertheless, stats that you don't want to have. And again, after, McCoy takes that 71-yard rush, the Rebels are able to get a touchdown of their own just before the break. They score relatively quickly. First time they were able to really, find their rhythm and get in the end zone first time all game, as they had 2 field goals prior to that. Then I think what was maybe the play of the game. So Oregon State still led, 17-13, and it was looking like, hey, they're going to have a 4-point lead going in the break. But then, Ryan, a terrible blocked punt. Oregon State didn't block it. They weren't ready for it. I know fans were clamoring for a roughing, but not when it's that cleanly blocked. And that sets up a UNLV field goal, right before the break. Then it's 17-16 at halftime. UNLV gets the ball. It's basically a new game. Oregon State's lead in whatever they had done to, get that in the first half was gone. And I ultimately think, that was, one of the big differences in this game, a game that was kind of weird. Like I said, the running game wasn't quite as there. The passing game had its moments, but McCoy spent a lot of this game on his back. The offense just wasn't able to carry, and I know they ended up with, 25 points and got the 8 in the second half, but outside of that 8 in the second half, the third quarter was horrible. Oregon State had 0 points. We just talked about it. They had 10 total yards, 2 drives that ended in punts when they could have, in theory, put the game sort of away. So, we talked about, Trent Bray talked about the postgame, Ryan, the self-inflicted mistakes. We'll be breaking it down in our story at Beavers Edge, obviously tonight. You and I sat here 2 weeks ago and we said they had issues. They should be lucky to get out of here with a double overtime victory against Colorado State. They led by double digits in that game in the fourth quarter, and it still led to, a double overtime matchup. And then you go back to last week, they had a 10-point lead after all the, hubbub of the first half with Nevada, but they still took control, had a 10-point lead, lost that game. And then this game here, you look 17-6, and they all end up coming on the short stick. I mean, it seemed like, and the thing I also want to mention too, Ryan, to get your thoughts are, is when Jack Conte kind of mentioned post-game that guys got too complacent. Like, how can that happen when you're in the city? Like, if you're Oregon State, like how can that happen, considering like what you went through last week and what you went through the week before?
Yeah, no, it's a valid concern. It's a valid question. It's something that I kind of thought, it's like, hey, look, like, yeah, you're playing a predominantly Mountain West schedule, but that doesn't matter.
Right.
Teams are talented,
right,
regardless of the opponent and their name and what level of competition that they play at. Any given Saturday,
right,
at least for what the Beavers have played so far in their schedule, any given Saturday, a team can win in college football. And we've seen it not just across Oregon State, but in the college football world, where
right,
you do not overlook a single opponent. And that hearing that was kind of eyebrow raising.
It was
of how. And I'm not going to question preparedness. I'm not going to question effort. Defense showed a lot of effort given what had transpired the week prior. But the fact that Kane mentioned that they kind of overlooked UNLV and also Nevada.
Yeah,
that's not a good sign. If they're doing that, like, that's I don't. My hopes. I know this is probably coming off the loss a little bit here, but my hopes aren't high for next week when they take on Cal and they travel on the road.
Right. I mean, it's a fair question. And, the other thing that I want to mention as we wrap up the video, make sure to check out BeaversEdge.com. Ryan and I are going to unload in our takeaways, and you guys will be able to get the full nitty gritty. But ultimately, I hate to put it down on one play, Ryan, but you go back and look at this game, only 7 points off turnovers. I know UNLV won by 8, but that turnover was right when Anthony Hankerson fumbled right behind us. You go back to your talk about the pass interference. You don't bring football down to one play, but when there were no other points off turnovers in this game but that drive, UNLV immediately turned that Anthony Hankerson fumble into 7 points here behind us. That's difference in this game.
Oh, yeah.
Just like the 4 turnovers were last week,
Oh, absolutely. Turnovers are going to kill you no matter what. And even, too, like, I do want to point out that block punt at the end of the first half also played a big role in swinging momentum. I know Bray and the players aren't going to really say that was a big factor, but that really was a big factor, and that really brought UNLV back into this game come the second half, where they finally looked like the UNLV that I was expecting coming into this game. It's like turnovers are going to kill you no matter what, and typically I think from where I stand on it, it's usually those penalty flags, but those turnovers are costly. Self-inflicted mistakes are always going to hurt you in a football game, no matter what. And for Oregon State, it did it this time around against Colorado State a few weeks ago. It didn't. They should have lost that game, if we're putting it bluntly, but they managed to pull it out. So lightning doesn't strike twice in this case for Oregon State.
Right, and again, Oregon State falls to UNLV 33-25. UNLV improves to 6-1. Beavers fall to 4-3. They will take on Cal next week before having another bye in their schedule, and then ultimately opening up the last 4 games of the season. So again, make sure to stay logged into BeaversEdge.com. From Ryan and I, we're going to have full breakdowns of this game over at BeaversEdge.com.